The laughter was not loud. It was worse. It was quiet, contained, the kind of laughter people share when they believe you do not belong. All eyes turned as she walked through the doors of the prestigious Mardo Gallery, wearing a plain black dress and modest heels. No diamond necklace, no designer clutch, just confidence and calm, which apparently were not enough. She smiled politely, unaware she had already been labeled by the crowd. Not as a collector, not as a bidder, but as a woman who had clearly taken a wrong turn into the world of the elite. Whispers followed her like perfume, soft but sharp. Who invited her? Is she staff? Must be someone's assistant. They judged her quickly, dismissed her instantly. And when she took a seat in the front row, reserved for serious buyers, the scoffs were no longer subtle. They had no idea who she was. They had no idea who was about to walk in, and they certainly had no idea what would happen next when her husband, one of the most powerful art investors in the world, would make a move that would silence the room, rewrite the auction, and remind them all that appearances mean nothing until the moment they do. Her name was Elena Brooks, though few in the room recognized it. Fewer still would believe that she once held the spotlight in the art world herself, not as a collector, not as a buyer, but as the painter who had quietly walked away from it all. Years ago, Elena's abstract pieces had caught the attention of major galleries in New York, Paris, and Tokyo. Critics praised her raw emotion, the way she layered pain and hope on canvas with effortless rhythm. She had lived in studios above cafes, eaten dinners that came from vending machines, and poured everything she had into her work. And then she met Nicholas Brooks. He was not flashy, not loud, just brilliant. A venture capitalist with a passion for forgotten artists and a deep respect for people who moved quietly through the world. He saw Elena not as someone to decorate his life, but as someone who gave it depth. They married 5 years ago, and with that, Elena chose to step out of the limelight. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She spent her days teaching art at a community center, and her nights helping Nicholas curate emerging talent from underserved neighborhoods. She never felt the need to prove herself anymore. Until tonight, Nicholas had encouraged her to attend the Mardell auction, one of the most prestigious events in the country, saying only, "There's something I think you'll want to see." He promised to join her before the final lot was announced. So she came, alone, in her favorite black dress, the one with a small paint stain near the hem, the one she had worn during her last solo exhibit before retiring her signature. She did not expect red carpets or recognition. She expected art. But what she found instead was judgment. The room was filled with high society regulars, investors, gallery owners, celebrities, dressed in glittering gowns and crisp tuxedos. Her presence, quiet and unassuming, disrupted the illusion of exclusivity. They watched her like an outsider, someone who had wandered into a world she did not understand. But Elena understood more than any of them could guess, because while they competed to own art, she had created it. And when the final painting was unveiled, a piece unlike any the auction had ever seen, they would all understand just how wrong they had been. The auctioneer's voice echoed through the grand hall, lively and practiced. Spotlights danced across canvases, bouncing off champagne flutes and glittering jewelry as bidding began. Elena sat quietly in the second row, hands folded in her lap, her auction paddle resting at her side. The murmurs around her had not stopped. "That must be a mistake," one woman whispered behind her. "Front row seats are for registered collectors." "She probably works for someone," said another. "Maybe a secretary." Elena heard every word, not because they were loud, but because they were designed to be just loud enough. She did not react. Years of gallery shows and critics had taught her the value of silence. Still, she felt the sting, not for herself, but for how quick people were to reduce others to nothing more than assumptions. A tall man with slicked back hair and a smug grin turned in his seat to glance at her. "First auction?" he asked with a smile that was anything but kind. "No," she replied simply. "Oh, well," he said, scanning her modest dress. You'll learn that the good pieces go fast, and to people with deeper pockets. There it was again, the subtle way they said, "You don't belong here." The auction continued, with works from notable names selling for hundreds of thousands. Gasps and applause filled the air with each final bid. Elena remained still, not raising her paddle once. Then the lights dimmed slightly. The final lot was being prepared. A hush swept through the room. On the stage, the assistants unveiled a large canvas covered in a velvet cloth. The auctioneer cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "the final piece of the evening is untitled, from a private collection, and is being sold anonymously. The artist, now retired, was known for raw, emotional work that once graced galleries in 4 countries." Elena straightened in her chair, heart ticking a little faster. She knew this painting, because she had painted it. It was one of her final pieces, something she had sold quietly to a private collector before stepping away from public exhibitions. She had not seen it in years, and now it hung in front of a room full of people who had mocked her for simply existing in their space. The velvet cloth was removed, revealing an abstract composition of fierce brushstrokes and aching color. The audience responded with instant interest. Murmurs rose. Several paddles went up before the auctioneer even announced the starting bid. Elena watched them, the same faces that had dismissed her now, staring at her work like it was treasure. The man who had mocked her leaned toward a woman beside him. "This is the real deal. I've seen her older stuff online. It's rare, impossible to find now. I'll start at 150,000, someone shouted. 175, called another. 200. The bids flew, faster than any other piece that night. And still, no one looked at Elena. No one realized the woman sitting among them, the one they had whispered about, the one they had insulted, was the very artist whose name they were now desperate to own. She remained silent, her paddle still untouched, her expression unreadable. And then he walked in. The room shifted once again. The double doors at the back of the gallery opened with a soft creak, barely audible over the rapid-fire bidding. But somehow everyone noticed. He did not speak. He did not need to. Nicholas Brooks stepped into the room with the quiet assurance of someone who owned more than wealth, someone who carried influence with silence. He was dressed in a tailored black suit, no tie, watch barely visible under a crisp cuff. Every movement was effortless, intentional. The bidding had just reached 270,000. "Do I hear 280? The auctioneer called. Nicholas began walking down the center aisle. Conversations paused. Paddles lowered. Faces turned. A low ripple of recognition moved across the room like wind through tall grass. He was not just another bidder. He was the man who had purchased half of the Paratini collection in a single afternoon. The same man who had backed emerging artists with million-dollar portfolios. Nicholas Brooks was not known for attending auctions. He was known for changing them. And yet, his eyes were not on the painting. They were on her, Elena. She met his gaze calmly, lips curving slightly. She was not surprised. He had kept his promise. The smug man beside her leaned in, whispering, "Wait, is that?" Before anyone could finish the thought, Nicholas reached the front row and stopped beside Elena's chair. He did not acknowledge the crowd, did not introduce himself. Instead, he turned to her and held out his hand. She stood, as if they were in a room of 2, not 200. Nicholas looked at the auctioneer. "Apologies for arriving late," he said smoothly. "What is the current bid?" The man blinked. 280,000, sir." Nicholas nodded. "Then allow me to place a bid." He raised his paddle, one of the gallery's exclusive private client markers, and said, 1 million. The room froze. The smug bidder's mouth opened. No words came out. A collective gasp rippled across the hall. The auctioneer stuttered. I beg your pardon, Mr. Brooks. Did you say 1 million? Nicholas repeated. "And I will be donating the painting to the Elena Brooks Youth Art Foundation, effective immediately." There was silence, and then it clicked. The artist, the painting, the name, the woman standing beside him, Elena Brooks. Eyes widened, necks turned. Conversations shifted from mocking to murmured apologies no one dared to voice aloud. The same people who had dismissed her as a nobody now saw her in full light. Not just as a guest, not just as a woman, as the artist, as the wife of one of the most powerful art investors in the country, and as the silent storm they never saw coming. Nicholas leaned toward her with a soft smile and said just loud enough for the front row to hear, "I believe the crowd has finally caught up." Elena smiled, not in triumph, but in peace. She had not raised her voice, had not defended herself, but in a single moment her truth had spoken louder than any insult they had whispered. The bidding stopped, completely. No one dared counter $1 million offer, not when it came from Nicholas Brooks, not when the painting was being gifted back to the artist's own foundation. The auctioneer gave a few awkward moments for formality, then declared it sold. Applause followed, hesitant at first, then growing. But it was not the thunderous kind meant to celebrate a record-breaking bid. It was the kind that filled a room too ashamed to speak, too proud to admit what it had almost overlooked. Elena remained standing, her hand still in Nicholas's. She did not gloat, she did not speak. She simply nodded toward the auctioneer, then sat down again, composed, poised, and finally seen. The man who had mocked her earlier turned away, red creeping up the back of his neck. Others avoided her eyes entirely, but a few, the wiser few, approached quietly. "Miss Brooks?" one woman began, her voice low. "I had no idea. Your work? It's stunning." "Thank you," Elena said softly. Another guest nodded toward Nicholas. That was a powerful gesture. Nicholas smiled slightly. It was not a gesture, it was a reminder. In the background, Ryan, the gallery's assistant who had offered Elena water earlier, before knowing who she was, smiled. She remembered kindness. He would not be forgotten. Later that night, as the gallery emptied, the plaque for the final painting was quietly updated. Elena Brooks, untitled, 2017, donated to the Elena Brooks Youth Art Foundation. And just like that, a space once filled with quiet cruelty had been transformed into one of quiet respect. Because sometimes redemption does not come with revenge, it comes with revelation, and the grace to say nothing when you finally could say everything. That night, Nicholas and Elena walked hand in hand beneath the soft glow of the city lights. The cool air carried with it the faint sounds of distant traffic, laughter from rooftop terraces, and the echo of a lesson quietly left behind. "You did not have to do that," Elena said gently, glancing up at him. "I know," Nicholas replied, "but I wanted them to see what I have always seen. Not a billionaire's wife, but a woman whose art changes people, even when they do not deserve it." Elena smiled. The city reflected in her eyes. "Funny, isn't it? They spent the whole night trying to figure out who I was, and the answer was hanging on the wall the entire time, and that was the truth. People had mocked her based on what she wore. They measured her worth in fabric and assumptions. But the moment she was revealed, not by status but by substance, their laughter turned into silence. Because the lesson was never about money. It was about value, and value is not always loud. Sometimes it sits quietly, unbothered by noise, waiting for the right moment to be recognized. Have you ever been judged for how you looked or where you came from? Have you ever seen someone underestimated, only to prove everyone wrong? Share your story in the comments. You never know who it might inspire. And if this message resonated with you, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and join us for more stories that remind the world. True worth is never worn. It is lived. Until next time.